All right. Well, we're back, and what a week. So let's just start off with the important stuff. Our man Kyle is free and not guilty of all charges. And that's pretty damn dope because, when you go out and you defend yourself against, well, how shall I frame this? When you're a minor male, and you see this guy who's got a history of raping minor males, and he's lunging at you after having chased you and said he's gonna fucking kill you. Well, you have to assume that he might be looking to have a little bit of fun before he does the whole deal. So, what are you gonna
I mean,
do?
I would give you that one, but let's be honest. That kid doesn't know who the fuck Rosenbaum was prior to him showing up. He was just being a violent little prick, which was in his nature, right? Like that's what he always did.
That's true, and I
Rosenbaum was
mean,
always a little
there's
violent.
no way that he knew Kyle was underage, even if he does have
Oh
cherubic
no, I'm sure. I'm
features.
sure Rosenbaum knew Kyle was underage, but I'm
Oh,
sure
he could
Kyle
probably
had no
smell
idea
it.
what
Yeah, yeah,
Rosenbaum's
fair.
history was.
That's true. Well,
Right?
and he had the whole wrapped up head thing, like he was trying to be an enemy from some fucking video game. I swear to God, the picture of him with the head wrap and the chain, it looks like something from a 1993 video game. It's so perfect.
Well, you listen to the story of this guy, right? And there's two distinct possibilities. And one is, and I'm I firmly believe that different individuals have different traits, and some of those traits, we aren't all born winners. Some of us are winners, and some of us are losers, and I guess you could say it's somewhat random. It's not, lineage plays a role in it, but those who are born losers are always losers. Like you're not gonna the folks who tend to engage in antisocial behaviors are traditionally antisocial.
Oh,
So
sure.
a guy who turns around and starts raping kids goes out and sits there and has violent outbursts, which
5 kids, age
he's
9 to 11,
prone to doing.
just to clarify. Boys.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
There was penetration.
I think Rosenbaum's just doing what Rosenbaum does, right? Like I've heard people say, well, maybe he was looking for like suicide by cop or something like that, and that's yeah, sure, I'll buy that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean that
But
logist or
realistically,
logically, that's actually not unreasonable. The guy just got out of
no,
jail.
it's
There's a
not.
very, very high likelihood he's not on his meds. We know he's done some horrible things, and we also know that people that do that sort of thing do not fare well in prison. They are not liked.
Well, and I mean all of that's true. So it could be suicide by cop. It could be. I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it could just be that he's a violent dude doing violent things. He got out of prison, found out there was, basically a little purge going on because they were all, you know, not particularly they were all, protesting police, whatever. So he goes out and he joins this movement that is basically allowing him to be, violent,
Well, yeah, as
which is
violent and crazy as he
what he
wants.
likes to do. Yeah. I mean, and so like I don't know. We can turn around, and I've heard, like I said, I've heard people say um, it could be suicide by cop, but the reality is that he could just be that much of an asshole, and he got what he deserved.
Oh, certainly he did. And I mean, let's be honest. Even if it was maybe a suicide by cop thing, he really was that much of an asshole.
He
And I mean,
really was.
like even if not, even if it was just him, like I'm gonna go out and do some looting and some stuff instead of going back to my home that I'd recently been kicked out of or whatever. And well, it didn't play out for him. You know,
It
what's
did not.
well, the term that really kind of some surmises this is surmises summarizes, excuse me, is play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes, indeed.
And
and he won a solid prize.
oh, he did. He did. Yeah. Well, we can check in on that Lake of Fire cam, see how it looks, and oh, looking mighty warm down there. Oh yeah.
You know what I really do like about this is this may be the kind of thing that is necessary to kind of turn the corner on this ship.
Well, no, it really is. I was
Because
discussing this with my dad earlier today, as a matter of fact, because I hadn't actually talked to him about the case since Thursday, and I was like, this is just a little case. It's some rando that had to defend themselves. It's not some earth-shattering Second Amendment backing case. It's not something going up to the Supreme Court.
nope,
It's not going to set
nope.
some major precedent. It's just one dude that had to do what he had to do at a time he had to do it. There's nothing
But
special about this other than that it
but
will affect a few other cases directly related to that night. And as a matter of fact,
I wouldn't even say that. I would actually say that it sets a solid precedent. Right.
well,
So the left has been operating under the impression that they can do whatever the hell they want with impunity, right?
let me pause
There
here,
is no
actually.
punishment, no recourse.
Well, let me hold you on that because actually I do want to get to
Sure.
that point. I'm going to kind of circuitously arrive. I promise you. So where this case legally doesn't really do much of anything other than for like his friend, probably ex-friend now, and for the prosecution of the rioters, arsonists, and looters. I mean, it makes the case that much stronger when you go against them because it's like, well, you've got this guy who was defending himself against rioters, arsonists, and looters. So there's that. And it makes the case against his buddy that much less strong because it's like, well, he didn't murder anybody. So if you were going to try and say, hey, your buddy's a murderer, we're going to cut you a deal if you snitch on him, it's like, well, now it's like my buddy just defended himself completely legally and committed no crimes. So the only thing you got me on is maybe a straw purchase. So that's all it does in a purely legal standpoint. But when we look at it outside of
Yes,
that legal standpoint, from a cultural
yes,
perspective, this case is huge. This case
yep.
sends a message that the Second Amendment, one, is alive and well. Two, if you're an innocent person and you go out and you defend yourself or your hometown, yeah, it was his hometown. Fuck off. I don't want to hear otherwise. He lived like 15 minutes away and his family was there. So, whatever.
And
But
he originally used to live there.
yeah, and
He
he worked
worked
there
there all
that
day,
day.
right?
Like
Right.
earlier in
Yep.
the day, he did his job there. And then he was
Yep.
actually, according to all testimony, except for the very sketchy dudes that did the hiring, was hired to do a job there that night. And
Yep.
did his job pretty darn well until things got really crazy. And it's like, I better get out of here. And so he did what? He retreated. And then some guys came upon him, and he did what? He retreated. And then they got closer, and he did what? He retreated. And then when they got really close, what did he do? He kept running. But then, he got backed up against some cars. And he had to do what he had to do, and he did. And I swear, if I was on the edge of being a faithful man, I would say that his hand was guided by the Almighty that night. There was not one errant shot, not one innocent person harmed, other
Yep.
than our man Kyle. And he came out
Well,
of there,
and I
is
think
physically well.
ignoring all of that,
Sure,
like
sure.
let's talk about the importance of what this
Oh yeah,
actually
what this
means, right?
means.
So
Yeah, this is
what
big,
this
big,
means.
big.
So it's not going to be, we can talk about the Second Amendment being alive and well. We can talk about how self-defense law now has a solid precedent
Sure.
for, you as an individual acting in behalf of your community.
Well, not only that too, but
Uh,
self-defense specifically using an AR-15, the most demonized weapon in America. Now it's like, hey, it saved this kid's life.
Well, I mean, that's neither here nor there, right? When we start talking about the case law and what it actually means, it means that if you go out into a violent protest and you are armed and someone attacks you, you can kill them.
That would
And
be the assumption.
this is a good thing. because
Oh,
the
yes.
left has operated. The left has operated for the last 2 years with full impunity. They don't get charged. They get released.
Well, let's
This
be
means
honest.
that
It's
there is
not just the last
potential.
2 years. They've just gone overboard in
Sure,
the last two
sure,
years.
but it's
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 been most
burning down
egregious.
entire cities. It's the scale,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's the
Absolutely.
scale.
That's exactly what it
So
is.
so what you have is you have a situation where the left has basically been told by politicians it's okay if you riot on our behalf,
Well, we have
and we will
Kamala
protect
Harris literally fundraising for these terrorist organizations and
you. Yes. Yep.
getting them bail.
And so she does this. Now the court has basically come out and said if you, a Proud Boy, go into a protest and you are armed and some little shit biscuit attacks you, you can shoot. And this means that the left no longer operates with impunity, not because of vigilantes or anything else, but because there can be an immediate force correction to their behavior there at that time. Now, by the way, in Kyle's case, Kyle ran away, but under Wisconsin law, there is absolutely no reason why you can't stand your ground.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is a
He had
stand your
no
ground
duty
state.
to retreat.
He
Actually,
had
I
no
think
duty
it's
to retreat.
not a stand your ground state, actually. But they have
I'm pretty
very.
sure it is.
I was reading about it earlier. I'm like 90% sure it's not, but that they have very strong laws on the books. So that as long as it's clear cut, you're good. I think they just don't have like a specific stand your ground statute, but that their laws are framed very similarly.
Got it. I mean, however it works, at the end of the day, this is big because this may actually decrease the temperature of the room,
Well, not
right?
only that, I mean,
If
just
you
look
have,
at Kenosha today. We don't
yep,
see a lot of big fires. I mean, yeah, we,
why,
we
and
saw a
that
little bit of
and
we
that is
saw a little bit of
because
action. We saw a little bit of
every
angry.
single one of those little pieces of shit learned that they can get shot. That it is not the cops that are going to arrest them and then release them back out to the street with their buddies. If they choose to engage in that behavior,
There's
they are
no
open.
Soros prosecutor
There is
in the United States of America that can save you from the next Kyle Rittenhouse.
That's exactly right.
It
So
doesn't
it
matter
is
how
better
many
in this
dollars
case.
were put behind that piece of shit prosecutor or that piece of shit DA or that piece of shit mayor. They can't stop a bullet. They can't do it.
They can't. And not only that, but the individual who pulls the trigger
Is
will be protected
justified.
because you behaved the way you behaved. Now, that is not justification for any individual to go out to any one of these protests and just start shooting people. Right?
Sure enough, not.
That
Absolutely.
that is not the case, but that shouldn't need to be stated. But in the event that the Black Lives Matter decides to go burn down somebody's building, you're free to shoot them.
Yep.
All
Simple
you have to
as.
do is show up, and you're done.
Well,
Right?
not just
And
show
that's a
up. I
good
mean,
thing.
you need to be in reasonable fear for your life, and following
It,
your local
sure.
regulations and all that. But yeah, I mean, the long and short is, if you're there with a gun and they're fucking around,
as long as you are not acting as the aggressor, if somebody is coming in and attacking you because they feel that they are the justice, whatever, you have the right to shoot them. And that consequence, an immediate consequence, a legally protected consequence to your behavior is much more valuable than any of these, hey, why don't we sit there and change the laws? Because basically America has turned around and said, we're not going to tolerate your shit.
well,
That's
and
a
to
good
put
thing.
it very simply, much like we learned over the year 2020, violence works.
Yeah, not any. Well, yeah, I guess
Yeah,
it does,
I mean,
doesn't it?
it really does. In the words of a movie character, force, my friends, is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived. Naked force has resolved more issues throughout history than any other factor. People who forget that always pay the price. It's a well-said statement. It's very clear and truly the way of the world.
It is indeed.
I mean,
But
that's
it
not
is.
necessarily a happy tale, but it's just the way it is.
Well, I mean, and that's kind of the thing. The only reason it occurred was because the people like Rosenbaum went out and decided to do what they were doing. It's not that they didn't.
Well, above and
do
beyond that too, it's actually that
BLMs.
the people at the top that are meant to do the protecting, well, they not only refused, they actively worked towards the interest of these individuals in many cases.
Yes, they did. But you know what? It's okay.
Well,
It's okay because I expect cooler heads will prevail now because this goes back to something that we talked about on the show a while back, right? When I was sitting there and saying we should bring back dueling. Because there's a whole lot of people who, if they actually had to face, personal honor or a bullet, they would not say what they say today. Right? You wouldn't see these accusations of racism fly if the consequences of accusing someone of racism was eating a bullet.
yeah.
Or having to face down somebody with a bullet.
Indeed.
So I am a firm believer, not necessarily that you should use force, you should walk softly and carry a big stick, right? I do not believe that you should be aggressive. But at the same time, if somebody's sitting there and fucking up your shit and somebody's acting out of line, I do believe in spanking the child.
Well, look at it like this. I mean, we can bring this right back to Rittenhouse. Perfectly back to Rittenhouse. We got a kid here who loves his community. I mean, legitimately, there's probably no argument against this. The kid's a lifeguard. He's like a junior sheriff, like a junior firefighter. I mean, as Boy Scout as a Boy Scout can be. And so he's like, hey, I'm going to go out and help. But things are real fucking crazy. Yep. So I better take a rifle just in case. Yeah. I'm gonna take some soap and some shit, clean up some graffiti, and if anybody needs any medical help, we'll do that. But it's a little crazy out there, so I can't have a pistol because I'm 17, not 18, not 19, not 20, not 21. Because you got to be 21 until there's a Texas case, by the way, that is trying this to try and get handguns into the hands of every legally of age person. Because unbeknownst to many, you can't own a pistol in almost every state unless you are 20. Well, you can't buy a pistol unless you're 21. A lot of states you can own it if it's gifted to you or lent to you, but that's getting into minutia. That's really not necessary. So basically, this kid, he's out there carrying the only thing that he can. And These people, they're like, well, he should have had something else. What the fuck else should he have had? Other than America's right arm. Tell me, please.
Now, stepping away from Rittenhouse, the verdict and everything, the one thing that I have not seen so far that I really would like to...
An apology from Black Rifle Coffee?
Prosecutor burned for this.
Oh, that too. Oh, no. They both deserve to be disbarred. They both absolutely deserve it.
Yep. I have seen... So there was
Binger and Krause.
Case that I watched. And it was a very interesting case. I can't remember what it was about or who it was for. But the prosecutor was serving the interests of the state. They got through the evidence selection. And the closing argument the prosecutor made was, based on all the evidence on the table, this man should go free. And the judge turned around and looked at him and said, what? And he goes, yeah. It is my interest to serve the law, and the law is what the law is, and he did his best to be in compliance, and justice is not served if we lock him up. And this isn't Rittenhouse or anything like that. That is the way a prosecutor should be. They should be seeking the interests of justice, because it doesn't, as much as we need an adversarial system.
Well, let's be honest, not necessarily the interest of justice, but if nothing else, the strictest interpretation of the law. If nothing else.
Sure. I mean, well, actually, no, I don't know if I would say the strictest interpretation.
Well, of course not, because that can sometimes be unjust. Yeah, no. But, I mean, just to say what their job is and down in writing, like, this is what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. There's a lot of leeway in there, and there's going to be society, and there's even going to be your local community that's going to make a lot of decisions in that. But, I mean, that's the long and short of it. But, sorry, I just kind of wanted to put that in there.
Right. No, I mean, and that's the thing. So these two prosecutors went beyond the pale, right? And there should be, like this is when Craig and I get all angry and upset about Fauci or Scientific American or one of these. This is when a professional individual goes outside of their uh, what do I want to call it? Not field of expertise, but
Out of their purview.
they're operating. What's that?
Outside of their purview.
Sure. That's a fine enough word. But they're basically they're not operating in an honorable manner. They're not operating within their field or of expertise or discipline. They're just basically acting maliciously or politically. And this, like, the reason that the professions like lawyers and engineers, the reason we get paid the money that we do is largely because we come in and we are expected to provide our clients and the system as a whole with our best expertise possible. And sometimes that means we tell our clients no, and sometimes that means that we tell our clients yes.
Well, your job is
Sometimes that
basically
means
to provide a true answer, as true as you can.
yes, it is. It is. We are supposed to protect our clients because if we provide a false answer, if we do something wrong, we expose them to liability. That's really what it comes down to. So they hire us to protect their interests, but protecting an individual's interest does not necessarily mean giving them everything they want and agreeing with them 100% of the time. Yes, guy.
Well,
Right?
when
That
you do
means
that, you
sitting
end up with a
there
bunch of
fighting-
entitled children that go and burn down cities.
Well, it's not even that. Like, I mean, when you turn around and you ignore that, what you end up running into is not you do run into a bunch of children ignoring that and burning down cities, but more importantly, the idea is that your personal expert is acting on your behalf, and the opposing expert is acting on their client's behalf, and that way nobody gets screwed because the two of you have to come to an agreement on what is fair, just, and true. Right? That's the idea, and it's a great one. But in the case of the prosecutor, like, this wasn't fair, just, and true. They're not supposed to just sit there and say, yeah, we're just going to go ahead with whatever you said. Like, that's not how this should play out, and it did, and that's wrong.
No, this was really well, up until the end, it was pretty much a clown show and just a miscarriage of justice. Like this whole thing has been.
It was indeed.
Like the Fifth Amendment issues, the I think Fourth Amendment issues, even like.
Well, I mean, if the state's case is that weak, the prosecutor should have recognized that and said, "We don't have a case, Your Honor." Right? Like the lead prosecutor should have turned to the
Exactly.
Attorney General and said, "You don't actually have a case." And yes, they're going to go through. Here's the consequence of that, right? Somebody keeps on telling you the answer you don't want to hear, and they'll just hire somebody else, and that's okay as long as there are consequences to dealing with yes men.
The thing about that is Fluffer Boy 2004 was in a really unique position to capitalize on that. I mean, he was already close buddies with a judge, so and sleeping there at night. Most nights for many hours. But, being such close friends with a judge, he would have been able to bring that and, actually say, hey, we don't have a good case here. And, there's a very real chance that if this case goes our way, that things could go bad. And, I mean, I don't know that it might have happened, but I do have a feeling that if the case had been decided a different way, or perhaps if it had resulted in a mistrial with or without prejudice, that Kenosha might be on fire tonight.
I mean, I think that if it had gone the other way, Kenosha would be on fire.
If it had gone the other way,
thing,
certainly.
Right? Like, again, as much as I wish that some people didn't need it, there are a bunch of people who do need to be informed that there are consequences for their actions. Their parents must not have told them what they are. And that just needs to happen. And if that has to happen at the end of a 16-year-old's gun and being
17.
let go free, then so be it.
But yeah, I mean, let's maybe the next one can be 16, right? Who knows?
Indeed.
I mean, we've got
Indeed.
some bless
Well,
those Zimmers.
17, yeah.
Well, no. Maybe the next one will be 16. Let's cross our fingers. I mean, get them out there. Godspeed. If you're listening that young, that's great.
I mean,
I mean, according to the
I hope
analytics,
for.
there is a possibility that there is actually such a person listening to the show.
Have we exceeded the audience of 3?
Yeah, actually, the show's doing pretty okay. I mean, like the lowest viewership on basically any show, other than the one that I mentioned, BlackRock in the title, is at least 3, and that's on Anchor. Like
Hmm.
the other sources, like every single one so far on BitChute gets at least 20 views. I've had one that went viral on there.
Very nice.
I mean, for me, I got about 400 views. That was the which one was that one? That was the not the Alec Baldwin one. The oh yeah, it was the Alec Baldwin one. Yeah, we got 415 views on that one.
Very nice.
Yeah, so
All of our wise and thoughtful viewers.
absolutely, yeah. Thanks for being here, guys. It's cool to have you tuning in. And while we're early in the show, because I know a lot of folks don't tune in all the way to the end, I'm Evan, at that fake guy Dan, everywhere except Facebook, because that place is fucking weird and I don't endorse robot lizards. You can find my man here at Ratman720. Also, most places, right?
Probably.
I mean, not necessarily able to get in touch with him now that he's had his
I mean,
religious
I
exemption
would
approved.
offer
He
that
will be working more, so
I will indeed. Yes.
congratulations
I
also on that.
managed
That's
to get a.
excellent news,
That was
sir.
pretty great.
That is.
That
I
was pretty
mean,
great.
we're running 2 pretty okay weeks, all things said. We
Yeah,
really are.
yeah. I mean, so like it is pretty amazing to walk in knowing what Title VII is, knowing what the restrictions are that they wanted, to put in a religious exemption as an atheist, and that was my actual exemption, and get it granted, is pretty great.
I can really only imagine.
Not by like some private company that has a lot more freedom, but by the government itself.
Yeah, there's a real sense of accomplishment in that. I know if I were in your shoes, I would feel kind of proud of myself for having actually pulled that off. I mean,
Well,
not that
I
it's
love
bullshit
that.
or anything, just that
Right.
I did this thing. I got it done.
Yep.
Fighting against the man.
I mean,
Literally the man.
There are easier routes. I could have lied. I could have turned around and tried to pretend I was some sort of religion. There's plenty of pre-existing write-ups out there for folks who are,
Oh, there's
devoted
great
Christians
Catholic
or
ones.
whatever. I paved my own path entirely up by myself for a secular religion. I manage like the needle for folks if they are not practicing some sort of faith is actually very narrow. You do not you don't have a lot of wiggle room when it comes to Title VII, right? They almost explicitly wipe out most of the secular belief systems. So I managed to thread that needle. That was amazing, and it was so satisfying to get that back. And all of the folks who were like as I hang out with a lot of Baptists, and we do a lot of theological discussions about back and forth about meaning of God, whether it exists, whether it doesn't, value of the literary text, talking about the Bible. So we actually have great little Bible studies where I refute the nonsense that they spew, and they were just sitting there in awe that it managed to get approved. So that was a good day. That was a very, very good day. Probably one of the happiest days I've had in a few months. I can put it all behind me.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. You are doing What Rage Against the Machine is not. You're standing up against the machine.
You could say I'm doing God's work, but
You,
he doesn't exist.
I suppose. Well, that's
Or
that's
or
your opinion,
alternatively,
but
you could say I'm doing God's work, but there is no God, and I am God. And therefore, I'm just doing the work of Steve.
you could. Or if if you're feeling particularly Gnostic, you could say because God is everywhere and everything. You being God, enacted your own will. That was the will of the divine.
Yep.
So really, any way to look at it, you're doing the right thing. Simply put.
Yep. So if anybody, I will offer this to our listeners. If anybody is struggling with religious exemption for work, let me know, and I'm not willing to sit there and post mine out there solely because I don't want people just taking it and not believing it, but I can probably help you thread that needle on Title VII yourself. So there's a lot of folks out there who are not, Christian Scientists or something that's easy to pluck from.
And quick reminder,
Hit me
everybody,
up on Twitter.
Steve is a government contractor in New York State. So, take that with a little bit of noteworthy advice.
I believe in this strongly, so if you do hit me up on Twitter, I will do my best to assist you.
So, do keep that in mind, and do hit either of us up for really whatever related to the show, advice on this, or just general questions. I can probably help you out with the general stuff. Of course, Steve here can help you out with the nuclear and, obviously a very strongly thought out exemption idea as well.
All I require is simply you join the Church of Steve. That's all that's needed.
Blessed be his name, right?
Blessed be his name. So, funny part was when I was looking for properties before I put in for the one that I found, I sat there in shock and awe because there was one that was a church. A church was up for sale. I could buy a church and fill it with icons of me. And I was so tempted. Like, nobody would rent from me, and I know that. And it wouldn't, it would have no income potential. And it's not in a great spot in the woods, but owning an atheist, buying a church, and converting it to a temple of himself would be the most baller move that I can think of.
It kind of is. That's like sub-genius level, I have to say. And I mean that would impress the Dobbs head even. So go for it, brother.
Set it up. We'd have robes, and it'd be a bathrobe, and I'd just hang out there for office hours in a bathrobe.
Sounds comfy.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Some loafers.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Sure enough. So,
seek salvation through Stavoniism.
I suppose so. Well, this isn't exactly salvation, but we do have somebody doing the right thing also. We've talked about this guy before, Enos Cantor, a baller who is indeed an absolute baller. He's put out a couple of custom shoes. They're basically just like one-offs. I'd love it if him and the people that he's working with would actually put out like these free Tibet shoes, these fucking anti-Xinjiang, anti-Yuan deals. Like, I would pick up a set of these, and I'm not at all like a shoe person. Just to support it. I'm going to put a link for everybody in here, but Enos Cantor, he's saying the right thing. I'm going to read directly from his tweet here from, 2 days ago. Money over morals for the quote-unquote king. Sad and disgusting how these athletes pretend they care about social justice. They really do quote-unquote shut up and dribble when big boss China says so. Do you educate yourself about the slave labor that made your shoes, or is that not part of your research? I mean, bravo, sir. Bravo. We've got to talk out about this. And on that very specific note, I don't know if you've heard, but it's just recently come out. There's a tennis, like big name tennis player out of China, named Ping Shuai. Ping Shuai. Excuse me if my Mandarin's a little off. It's not my first, second, or third language, but her allegations were one of the higher ups in the CCP, one of the party officials, was basically like, "Listen, you're gonna fuck me, or we're gonna lock you up forever, or something." She wasn't really specific, but she was essentially raped by this head of state fella, and she came out with a not a tweet. It was on WeChat or Weibo, something like that, and it was out there for like 30 minutes or something. Like, I was raped by this guy when I wouldn't meet his demands. Deleted almost immediately, and she has disappeared.
Yeah, things like that happen.
They do. They do. So this was made on November 2nd, and since that time, she's just gone. No word of her at all. There has been like a release on one of her social media that's it. So, that's as believable as possible. Yes, it was. It was Weibo. Let me see here. Yeah, deleted within 30 minutes, not 30 seconds, excuse me. And that was done, obviously, by the party people, because in all of their... Well, I mean, obviously, you'll know this, but for anyone listening, all of their state social media, or I should say state available social media, is directly censorable by party censors and directly accessible. Where ours is, and is treated like so much chattel, we technically have ownership of it, so it is ours and shouldn't be toyed with. Obviously it is. I mean, we've seen the size of the data centers here in the States, but what they're doing is
Well,
sort of
you know,
legal or extrajudicial. But this is truly another matter. I mean, this is directly your Ministry of Truth, looking in on your post and saying, nah, we're not going to allow that window, and we just delete it. So what happened here? She said it was Vice Premier Zhang Guoli of coercing her into sex at his home 3 years ago. And bam, she's gone. And this is coming out of CNN, and, they're a garbage institution, but if I can post this shit from CNN, there's some weight to it.
yes,
But
indeed.
I don't know if you've been aware of this, but yeah, this is starting to catch a little bit of steam, as well it should, because this is it's a big deal. When she wasn't able to, I mean, my own thoughts on the matter are 2019 rolls around, she's doing fine. 2020 rolls around, there's no games, there's no nothing, everything's shut down. She's getting tired of everything, and maybe somebody comes up and is like, hey, if you want to, still keep going after all of this is over, maybe you need to do that again. And she's like, yeah, I'm not fucking dealing with this. Does a post, and then pop, she's gone. But,
Well, I mean,
just
at the
conjecture
end
on
of the
my
day,
behalf.
right? I don't know. I don't know if it would be to anything. It could just be people working through shit, right?
Possible.
That happens. Especially, traumatic things, and I would argue this is a traumatic thing. Somebody coming you like, and I don't want to compare going through what I went through with the United States government to what a sexual assault. I really don't. I want to distance that. But somebody coming up to you and telling you that your lifelong dream is only allowed as long as you bend the knee or suck the dick or whatever else, right? As long as you are in that capacity, in that position, that is a horrible feeling. It makes you angry. It makes you upset. If you comply, I mean, I don't know where I'd be if I had turned around and just complied with the executive order, which I disagree with vehemently. But I'm sure it wouldn't be a good place, right? There is
Oh,
a
sure.
tremendous amount of stress that comes from dealing not only with the threat, that you have to kind of process, but also with your response to the threat. If I had turned around and been in a situation where they denied the vaccine exemption and I had to take it, that would be manifest injection upon my person that I don't want, in order to sit there and keep my wife happy. Those kinds of things are really, really hard for an individual to sit there and tolerate and deal with, because you have your ethical principles, and it's the stuff that you have to carry with you forever. And are you willing to sacrifice for, security, essentially? And that's tough. Like that's really, really tough.
It
It's
is.
very difficult.
I mean, you did the right
And
thing. You really did. And anyone
I
who
well,
has these sort of questions, if you've got the
I mean,
questions, ask them and say no, because
I'm, I'm
your
not looking
rights
to
are
like
like your muscles.
take the
If you don't
spotlight here.
use them, they go away.
I'm not looking to take the spotlight here, right? This is a whole different kettle of fish. But my point is that it is very difficult and challenging, and people have to work through that. And sometimes that kind of stuff can take time. So if she's working through with it, she's getting to a better place, and she decided this was what she wanted to do. It's unfortunate that they disappeared her,
Truly.
but that's
And
that's
I've
just the
got
way it
the
is.
I have the whole post here. It's very short, so I'll just read it. Why did when I'll read the translation. I don't have the original post. It doesn't exist anymore. Just to clarify. Because of course. Anyway, why did you have to come back to me, took me to your home, and forced me to have sex with you? I couldn't describe how disgusted I was, and how many times I asked myself, am I still a human? I feel like a walking corpse.
Yep, that sucks.
And I mean, and that's kind of what it is. I mean, to put it in simple terms, you've sold your soul.
Yep.
And the thing about it is too, there, she didn't have a choice. Honestly,
Nope. Nope. And
I mean,
that's
if she said
that's.
no, then it would have been a lot worse.
Yep.
It would have been what's happening to her now, whatever that might be. Plus, she'd have been almost undoubtedly forcibly raped by that fella.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
It's
disgusting way it is when
it's
the
a tough case.
people that have been threatening all of America for the past 6-ish years get power. That's how it plays out.
Yes, indeed.
Like all these horror
Yes,
stories
indeed.
out of Xinjiang, out of, well, you don't hear any of the horror stories out of Tibet anymore because it's been overrun. You could free Tibet now and it wouldn't matter because there is no more real Tibet. I mean, it's just a place now. It's been pacified, if you will. And that's horrible.
I
Absolutely
mean,
fucking horrible.
China is a terrifying influence, and the sad part is there's
The
a lot of folks in the
CCP
U.S.
is every single cartoon depiction of the Nazis. Every single exaggerated and blown out of the water thing from the Nuremberg trials. I believe we take the numbers from the Nuremberg trials. It's something like 120 million people were killed by the Nazis. But you know what? I wouldn't put that past China. I wouldn't put that past China at all. I'd imagine there's possibly even more. I mean, if we look at some of the really troubling numbers and just some of the air pollution that we were going over at the time of early COVID just ripping through China, there was some really distressing shit there. There's still 30 million phones that never got turned back on again.
Yep.
And we don't have an answer
Well,
for that.
if we turn around, if we go back to where we were at the beginning part of COVID, COVID was terrifying, right?
Oh, certainly.
So when we start talking about when you sit there and you start listening to people who just formed one opinion at the start of this thing, that's kind of problematic in its own way. My opinion has changed throughout the COVID response, predominantly because I've seen what's been happening and what has and has not worked,
Oh,
but
sure.
B, because the actual risk is does not appear to be as bad as it was originally forecast. Now, the difficulty you have
Oh,
is
I
things like these
wholeheartedly agree
30 some
there.
odd
I
million
was
phones.
I was much more concerned about this early on than I am now.
Oh yeah,
Much more
you
concerned.
start talking March 2020, and I was thinking airborne Ebola. I was thinking 10-20% death rate. Right? I wanted to. I don't want to say that I wanted to be in a lockdown per se. Certainly not the way that they did it. But I would have been very okay with teleworking and staying at home. Right? It was only after we got into the third or fourth week of March, maybe first or second week of April, where all of a sudden we realized the fatality rate's closer to like 0.2% or 0.4% or whatever it is overall. That all of a sudden I changed my mind, and that is you start talking about things like this story. I think we talked about it. These 30 million phones that just went off.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what happened to them.
And then, of
Fucking
course, there's
terrifying.
the and then the other part I mentioned there. You know, the air quality measurements. There was a
Yep.
lot of ash in the air. A lot of
Yep.
ash.
And there were reports coming out of the what is it?
Yeah, mobile
Not
furnaces.
composters. Yeah, the
Mobile
crematoriums.
incinerators. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there was reports that we were getting saying that they are going 24, like they are burning twice, two or three or four or five times as many bodies as they were before. So it is possible. Now, the other thing is that when we're talking about a population of 1 billion people, what's 35 million, right? That's not. This sounds terrible, but that's 0.3%. Right? That's really what it comes down to is 35 million in a population of 1 billion is 0.3%. If you start sitting there and talking about something on the order of what are they at? Are they what 2 billion or 3 billion now?
I want to say like 2.5 billion. I don't know. I'll look.
Yeah, let's find that out. But either way, it's still like I know it was 1 billion years ago.
Oh,
Um, but
1.4.
go ahead. So all right, so 1 billion. So it's about 0.3%, which by the way is roughly around the fatality rate that we actually expect. It's especially when you start talking about these older folks and all the other stuff. So 35 million people in the entirety of China is, or 35 million phones in the entirety of China is not necessarily unreasonable for a pandemic that was completely and totally uncontrolled. And then they basically just sat there and actively fought the infection by isolating people and preventing them from, getting treatment. So I mean, we may when we sit there and we talk about the 35 million phones, that was terrifying because we're hearing these numbers, but there's 1.4 billion people in China, and I'm sure the majority of them have have cell phones. Not now, there's certainly going to be a portion that don't, but you're talking about all of their elderly. That could easily be that percentage of the population because they do have an aging population. So we may be legitimately we had reasons to be concerned, but it still wasn't the death rate that we were quoted. But scary shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It truly is. And excuse me, kind of speaks to another point as well with kind of the Sinovax and its really rapidly waning efficacy, being that was probably built off of either the wild type or laboratory samples, which, well, let's be honest, they had laboratory samples. So when you have something that theoretically was evolved ahem, to adapt very quickly, you could see why something made for the very first strain of it would lose efficacy pretty quick.
Well, yeah, and that's an issue. Well, actually, so I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that because the alpha strain, or well, not the alpha strain, but the original strain, is going to have the entire surface proteins of all of the potential variants. Right? There's potentially maybe a brand new bonding site location that one of them could have had entirely randomly. But the probability of that happening is very, very small over the course of the 2 years that we've had this running, even with a 6 billion potential hosts. It is infinitely more likely that what we've seen as time has gone on is the evolution and suppression of the original spike protein, which everybody decided was the holy grail of
This is the magic
virology.
thing. If we fight that, it'll be all gone forever.
Right, exactly. And they just ignored the other, what was it? I think Craig said it was 80% of the surface.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean,
they
this is
ignored
the
20%
reason
of the
why
surface.
I have endorsed, the only one I fucking endorsed this whole time has been the Johnson & Johnson. Like, it's the only one that
I
does
mean,
anything more for you. And even then, it's not that great.
it doesn't do anything more than the spike protein. Still does that. I mean, the closest you can get to like any. So my understanding, and I could be completely wrong here, because I don't like once I found out their gene therapies, my personal investment in their specific mechanisms of action and the differences between DNA and mRNA is rather mute. Foreign genetic material manufacturing non-human proteins within my cells is done. Like you're out of things that I'm interested in taking.
I got you. It
But
sounds like some shit from
the
the
reason that
X-Files.
I think right, the reason I think the Johnson & Johnson was a better choice is that the DNA mounts the protein on the outside of the cell, whereas the mRNA just basically rapidly replicates as much fucking protein as possible, and that migrates out of the cell and into the bloodstream. And it's very likely, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier, they're like, why is it they're decaying so quickly? The short version is probably that you're just pissing it out because it's a protein in your bloodstream. It's not like this grand thing that has no. It's significantly smaller
Well,
than an
that's
entire viral envelope
well
or a chunk of a
precisely the
viral
reason
envelope.
why it's administered intramuscularly as opposed to intravenously. I mean, you want it to stick around as long as it can, and if you put it in the blood, yeah, you probably are just going to just about piss it out.
Well, I mean, you're still going to piss it out, right? If it's an IM shot or that, it's going to migrate, right? That's part of the issue that you have. It's supposed to be like a localized infection, but if this spike protein is not in your bloodstream, then you're not going to be regular. If the spike protein is not hitting your bloodstream, you're not going to be getting the IgG antibodies, right? So there's no point, right? You're getting no immunity if it doesn't hit your bloodstream. If it does hit your bloodstream, you piss it out. And that's probably why we're seeing these huge spikes in efficacy, because they did hit the bloodstream as part of the initial injection, right? That protein did migrate to the bloodstream, but it's this tiny little bitty thing that you piss out within 24 to 48 hours. You get a response for the residual because there's a lot of it that got made, and your immune system did respond by producing antigen. But at the same time, you're getting rid of it before you're getting any significant conversion to deal with this stuff. Whereas if you inject whole virion particles, such as Sinovac or Sinopharm, or Codagenics, or one of the other ones that I happen to endorse, if you're doing whole virion uh, technologies, those things are significantly larger particles, right? Let's say that we treat it as I don't know the exact number of bonding sites, but let's say there's 80 of them, right? Or 100 of them. The protein is less than 1/200th each protein in size. It's just going to flow right through you. Like that was one of the other things when you start talking about gene therapies versus vaccines. Gene therapies are regulated in such a way that they are required to identify what happens to the protein that you manufacture. And if they found out that it all just gets pissed out within the first 48 hours, then so be it. Like, they would not have authorized
Well, theoretically, anyway.
this. Yeah. I struggle with the folks who go to conspiracy theories on these things, Not that there aren't valid reasons for it, but I really do believe that fear is the predominant motivator when it comes to vaccines and vaccination and all of this stuff. The reason that we went through the process of changing CDC and FDA definitions of vaccines to accommodate these technologies is fear, right? And then we kept on changing them because they kept on failing to hit traditional wickets. What is it? The 2015 definition is an inactivated or weakened organism, that's infectious organism that's introduced to the body's immune system to help it fight. That's the pre-2015 version. The 2015 to 2020 is the same thing. Well, the 2015 is the weakened organism to provide immunity. The post 2015 all the way up until September of 2021 is to anything that sits there and induces immunity. And post September of 2021, it's anything that significantly reduces your risk or something of that nature. It's ridiculously stupid.
Yeah, it's really really fucking dumb now.
Oh, it provides some amount of protection or something like that against an infectious organism. You're like, are you serious?
It's like yeah, we're going from fucking Jesus Christ. It's like we're going from fucking
specific technical definition
to
a very generic, non-specific definition, and then they had to change it because it still wasn't inclusive enough of their technology.
Well, yeah. Here's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, it's like we went from penicillin to aspirin. These are not really the same things. Like, yeah, they make you a little better, but one actually fucking fixes problems, and the other just kind of lowers inflammation and just makes you hurt less. So
I mean, I think that so I see people go, oh, so you think the vaccines are evil and that there's a giant conspiracy? No, I don't think that. I have no interest in taking an experimental gene therapy. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who should take the experimental gene therapy, because COVID is terrifying to people who are immunocompromised or, over 65. Like, straight up, if you're over 65 or immunocompromised, there's literally zero reason to not take the vaccine.
Well, because, unless you've got your own issues.
Genetic risk. Sure. But I mean, you're realistically, like, the concern, and we've talked in depth about this. The concern range that I have is the next, 5 to 30 years. I'm not concerned about tomorrow. For folks who are over 65, 30 years is going to be a stretch to get there. So you're probably, like, your window's limited in what you should be concerned about. If you are talking about the next 5 years, those kinds of effects are things like fertility and ADE. Well, if you're 65, you don't care about fertility, so the only thing you have to worry about is ADE, and most likely it's going to be like that scene out of Star Trek where Dr. McCoy is sitting there and just consistently injecting Kirk with numerous vaccines to try to sit there and cure the new disease and symptoms that he's having. So, like, that you can sign up for that future, but for somebody who has low risk and everything else, there's no reason to sign up for an experimental future of potential craziness.
Well, above and beyond that, too, you're looking at a DLC-based immune system, and that's kind of horrifying,
That is a terrifying idea, yep.
Because, as it was, we were setting up to transition a lot of health companies into service providers because, things were looking promising. Money could be spent on longevity treatments, and it could be made available to more people. But then 2020 happened, and conveniently enough, we've got to redevote a lot of efforts and monies that were pretty much already set aside to go into things like that. And now we've got a whole nother issue, which is pretty goddamn bad. And on top of that, we've got some fringe stuff that really needs more investigating because it's so brand new. It's not even seen studies or released. Like the enhanced senescence of cells by way of the spike protein or the increased uptake of iron to levels that could be causing some of these long COVID issues. And I can't really back any of this up because, like, the research on it it's literally weeks old and it hasn't even had a chance to be put into
Well,
any
and
papers.
I ran into that today when I was out on the search and rescue stuff. Somebody turned around and made a comment that, oh, all the fake news is on the left, and you're like, no, I think it's or on the left does not seem to have as much fake stuff. I'm like, are you serious? Like, let's talk risk assessment because I know, like, I heard him talking there, like, well, all these people pretend there's no risk. And yes, the right does tend to underestimate the actual risk of COVID, but the left overestimates it. And that's where it is. And he turns around and he goes, well, what other examples do you have? And I said, well, there was a most recent study that sits there and talks about things like long COVID. And it said that, long COVID is predominantly in individuals who didn't receive a PCR test. It wasn't something that was actually laboratory confirmed COVID. It's people who are showing up to the hospital and feeling sick with COVID-like symptoms, and they seem to be the ones getting long COVID, whereas long COVID and some of these other symptoms seem to be significantly less in folks who have actual confirmed cases. So it's possible the long COVID and the long-term symptoms and the destroyed lungs and all this other stuff that people are assigning to COVID isn't necessarily due to COVID. And then there's other things like there was a paper not too long ago that suggested that we are starting to see major rises in respiratory viruses or all viruses as a whole in our society.
Well, there's this
as
talk of
we
the
emerge
this
from
super
this
cold
lockdown.
that's going around right now.
Right, right. So and one of the theories is that our immune system may be a little bit more fragile than we originally thought, and by isolating ourselves and not exposing ourselves to all of the stupid shit that we get every year, that we all kind of grumble and groan about, by not doing that, by not embedding consistent diseases in ourselves, we put our immune systems into a state where they basically relaxed to the point where they don't have anywhere near the antigen levels required to go sit there and fend off these commonly occurring things. And that's one of the current theories, which actually would align very well with some of the older research into why our more recent generations tend to have significantly more allergies than previous generations. It's largely thought to be clean home syndrome, where you get these people who are obsessed with sterilizing every surface and filtering every particle.
In other
And so
words,
these kids grow up and
parents, let your kids play in the dirt.
your kids, don't stop your kids from picking their nose and eating it, and don't stop your kids from playing in the mud. Those
Okay.
two things will expose them to the majority of strains of bacteria that they will encounter in their daily life and
Actually,
provide them safe,
not only
responsible
that.
immunity.
Okay, this is going to be really gross, but it is a human function. We were designed to work this way, but it's really fucking gross. So, when your kid is picking their nose and, like, eating it,
Yep.
that's nasty. But that is introducing your child to allergens in the area that their system has processed and made safe to a degree.
Which, by the way, is not just allergens. It's also viruses and bacteria. Because within your mucus is a bunch of antibodies that is part of your IgA system. And when you sit there and you eat your boogers as a child, you end up basically absorbing the infection and transferring it to some of the other immune system entry points, an already neutralized pathogen. So what you're literally doing when you see your kid eating his boogers is he's inoculating himself against viruses and bacteria in his environment, as well as allergies. A perfect example is the rise in peanut allergies. There used to be this thing where for a while doctors were saying women shouldn't eat peanuts when they're pregnant. That's not true. You should definitely eat peanuts when you're pregnant, because if you don't eat peanuts when you're pregnant,
Absolutely, women.
then
Get some legumes into your system.
yep, if you don't eat peanuts when you're pregnant, your child will likely have a peanut allergy, especially if you avoid it for the first few years. Same thing with lactose. You can induce lactose intolerance in kids simply by not exposing them to lactose early enough as part of their life cycle. So if you don't, make sure your kids drink milk. Not because milk's a good beverage, it's not. It's a giant sugary beverage, but if you don't want them to, be lactose intolerant, they need to cultivate the gut bacteria that allow them to process that sugar.
And I mean, if we're being honest, milk, it is a powerful foodstuff. So you might as well be able to make use of it because if you can, yeah, it is a big glob of kind of goopy sugar, but there's a lot there that your body can make use of. Like a lot.
There are indeed.
Now, I was actually, again, being terribly circuitous with my last point a minute ago, but I was wanting to get around to how the evolution of the coronavirus has brought us to the Delta. And we've talked about this before, where, or at least I've mentioned
We
it,
have indeed.
where the Delta, we got lucky. We got one that's more transmissible.
We did.
That's shitty. That's not good. But less dangerous generally overall, and specifically less lethal, which is, that's ace. So I've got some news, which I imagine you've probably heard of this. There's a new Delta-based strain. So all these people that have got
Aren't there like two of them right
oh
now?
no, there's actually
There
quite
are
a few,
two
but there's
Delta-based
one
strains.
that I want to get into specifically because it's very interesting and very poignant. There's the AY42 strain. It's
That's the one, yeah.
yes, this one is good news.
Yeah.
Good news about COVID, Evan? Yes, indeed. Very good news. As I had said before, if it continues down this evolutionary track, we're looking really good. And guess what, folks? This one is the next jump in evolution exactly down that same track. It is more infective still and another order less deadly. So, this is exactly what we want. We want these Delta variants to continue down this line. So that at the end of the day, we're just dealing with another cold.
There's a general theory of infectious disease, which is any new disease that we encounter, and we will encounter new diseases over time. Every new disease will automatically evolve over time within a population to be not an issue. Predominantly because viruses and bacteria don't want to kill the host. That's just an inadvertent side effect of their replication and whatever is associated with their immune system. It doesn't do them any good to kill a viable host because that means that they'll die too.
Yeah, very rare is the bug that truly wants to destroy its host. They do exist.
Right.
And the destruction of the host often is a part of that thing's process. I mention this specifically because there are some parasites in ants that zombify ants, and
right. But those
are exceedingly rare, and they are absolutely outside of the realms of normalcy.
And they're also not viruses and bacteria, which don't have they don't have the same complex life cycle.
Certainly not. But I just want to make the example because
much rather replicate en masse as much as they can. And so, yes, your immune system will respond to them and wipe them out. But if they don't do very much harm, then your immune system doesn't respond anywhere near as strong, and therefore you spread it much more readily. And the consequence of this is that over time, as much as the previous logic was, and this was back when I was in high school, epidemiologists were sitting there and being, well, the problem that we have is that maybe there's this one flu variant that exists somewhere in the world that could all of a sudden pick up a mutation that would make it deadly. The reality is selection pressures favor less deadly viruses and more infectious and less deadly viruses. And Delta's continuing down the standard and predicted evolutionary biology path.
I mean, it's really all we could ask for. I mean,
I mean, we could
short of
ask
the
for more
problem
car
actually
attendants.
being resolved and people not being assholes, Wuhan being locked down in the early days, and the military games not being held in Wuhan
Listen,
under some seriously sus, uh, you know, settings.
we could ask for a lot of things. I want a virus that makes me poop $1 million bills.
That's a thing, right? Not the virus, the $1 million bill.
I'm sure it is.
There's like two of them. There's like two real ones. I think some
Isn't I
fucking
thought there was
stunt
like
from
a
the 80s or
trillion dollar
90s.
coin, or is the trillion dollar
No, that was a
coin just
threat.
a
That was a threat.
that was a threat?
Yeah,
Got it.
if you don't get that deficit fixed, then we'll just print a fucking $1 trillion coin. Like so they folded to the Fed, who is as federal as Federal Express.
Mm.
But I mean, what do you expect of a skin suit full of maggots and a slave owner who worked for the DA in California, right? Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, she worked
They
for the
weren't
DA
actually
in Phoenix,
slaves.
California.
Well, yeah, Well, all we can really say is that Officer Harris, she really sucked.
She did.
I mean, she sucked. You
She
could.
apparently did a great job.
She did. I mean, good enough that she could, hang out in the DA's office, toke up a fat blunt while listening to Tupac and Biggie's newest albums that had just come
Mm.
out then while she was working at the DA's office and smoking, as she said in her campaign, while she was also holding pot crime people over their sentence to do slave labor for the state. Oopsies. Well, maybe that's why she's got a 28% approval rating right now. Who knows?
You know what the greatest part is? I think Quinnipiac University found that Biden's down to 36%. This is just great. Every week he drops 2%.
I mean, we are.
I'm really curious, like when we hit the territory where unilaterally we all vote no confidence, I think that there's some point where there's like a no confidence vote,
Well,
and
for a
they can
fact
remove
they
him for
don't
that.
want to get him out of there before 2022 being up because they want to leave the option for two full Kamala terms. If they go
True.
over the 2 years, it literally
True,
cannot
but
be
the
done.
problem is that she's at 28%
Oh
approval.
yeah, she is hated even
Now,
more than him, which is astounding. It's like
what and I will say so watching the left, I try to read the left and the right. I think it was Trevor Noah or one of those others. Um, came out and said this has to be due to racial sexism or something like that. And I don't think he's necessarily. I understand the point that he's making. I
oh
think the
yeah,
issue is
it's
that
one
every
of those
single
you're
time he's
right,
been.
but you're right for all the wrong reasons. And you're talking about the wrong people when you say that.
Well, no, his point was that she hasn't done anything,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Literally, or Trevor Noah, right? So he comes out and he says, "How is it that they hate this woman who hasn't done anything? This is ridiculous. The only reason you can hate somebody who hasn't accomplished anything is because of racial sexism or something ridiculous like that." And the answer is no. You can actually hate her for exactly the reason that you stated. She has literally accomplished nothing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
She, she,
if I
she
was
hasn't
given a
glorified.
job, a simple job to go down to the border and clear this shit up, how
Yep.
long did it take her to even go to the fucking state? She didn't go to the border. But how long did it take her to go to the fucking state? She had nothing
Well,
on her
that's
fucking
the point.
plans until old Dawn was like, if your guys aren't going to do it, I guess I will. Shit. So,
Yep.
and then it's like, all right, I'll go down this Thursday since he's going down on Friday. And she goes to like northern Texas or something and gets a steak somewhere and and a photo op with Bobby Francis O'Rourke. Bobby Beta Francis O'Rourke. This fine wee Irish lad he is. The face of Texas, Bobby Francis O'Rourke. But anyway, she goes, north of the border to go and do the photo op, and like, hey, see, I showed up, and and still this administration is fighting the court order of the reinstatement of the stay in Mexico policy, which fucked over coyotes. It fucked over coyotes, my man. Like, cartels.
They kind of. So here's the issue, right? And I've had this argument with numerous conservatives, numerous times on numerous issues. There's a lot of, because Biden came out saying Trump did everything wrong, and that was his basically the closest thing was, hey, running his sole thing that we can all agree on that he ran on, considering he hid in a closet for months, is that he's not Trump. Right? That is his campaign promise. He is not Trump. Right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And that means that everything that Trump did, whether it worked or not, he's got to run against. And the truth is, when we see things like the vaccine mandate or the extension on the rent moratorium, he has progressives in his party attempting to hold him accountable for, what they want. And he's basically turning around. I'm not going to say he's really smart about it, because if he was smart, he would just, be honest. But I do think that there are certain things that he has to do politically that he knows will fail horribly. And the problem is, because he chose to take those positions early on, he ends up looking like an idiot as they all come to fruition. So when it comes to things like the remain in Mexico policy, if he doesn't fight it, then he's a liar about Trump's policy. So he needs the courts to basically come in and say, nope, you have to actually say this and maintain this policy, right, in order for him to actually enforce it and go through with it. When it came to the rent moratorium, he needed the courts to come out and say, nope. You actually can't turn around and force people to live in some landlord's property, right? And the same thing is true for the vaccine mandate. There was some initial political support for it, as much stress as the whole thing caused me. I think that part of the reason that he came out with a vaccine mandate the way that he did is specifically so that the courts will sit there and knock them down, right? He gets to come out, and some of this is, hey, if we put ourselves in this position, then people can respond to it as such, and we can do the soft power move. Another portion is...
And actually, let me pause you for just a quick second. Let me just pause you for a quick second and put an asterisk in here in case what you're saying or what I'm saying is confusing to anybody. When we say him, we mean his handlers or her handlers, obviously. Sorry, continue.
Sure. Whatever it may be. At the end of the day, there is the difficulty that you have when reconciling the Democratic Party is he has to sit there and push things forward that will likely get struck down in courts, and he does it either for soft power gains or to appease the base, right? And that way they come out. I will give Biden credit for this.
Well, actually, let me pause you again, because case in point is this Kyle Rittenhouse thing. When asked in person by reporters, his initial comments were, "I stand by the jury's verdict," which, okay,
yep,
fair enough. That's reasonable. But then he gets back, and, whoever his handlers get a hold of that, and they're like, oh, no, we can't have this. This doesn't jive with enough of our base. Actually, it does, but it doesn't jive with the vocal minority who are in the halls of power.
Right.
So it comes out to, I am angered and confused by the result.
Right.
When the president of the United States is angered and confused by an innocent man being seen not guilty by a jury of his peers, you'd better be fucking worried.
Well, and again, this isn't the only case where
Oh,
this has
angered and
happened
concerned. I'm
where
sorry.
he's
I
been
I
corrected.
misquoted that. Angered and concerned, not confused. Angered and concerned were his exact words in the recent update. I don't want to be
I mean,
misquoted on that because it's very noteworthy and a heady statement.
at the end of the day, this is not the first time that's happened for him. It's not going to be the last time that it happens. There is whether you believe Biden is competent or not, it doesn't really matter. There is a portion of what he does that has to do with appeasing this 3% of the population that is hardcore into one camp or the other. So he'll pass things that will get struck down in the courts, and that way he can say, "Oh, I tried and I just failed, and it would have worked if only for those darn judges."
You know,
Right?
I
But
I
at
get
the
where
same
you're coming
time,
from, and I don't know
as
if
it's
I
changed
actually
the Supreme
agree.
Court layout, that's okay.
Because I
It,
mean, I can appreciate the point of view, but I'd say a lot of these are fuck it, let's do it, go for it. Either it goes or it doesn't, and we'll just try again later. I mean, that's kind of the vibe I'm
uh,
getting.
I think that is what that 3% base sits there and thinks. But the reality is that I don't think Biden has always been milk toast, right? Historically, he's always been milk toast. He is not a progressive candidate in any way, shape, or form. But the problem is that the Democrats decided that they really
Hold
wanted
on now.
to
Hold
attract
on,
that
hold on.
progressive
Are you
base.
telling me that Negro Joe is not progressive?
I
That a man
I am
who was
telling
so
you that.
kind as to build basketball courts for super predators is not progressive?
I would never go so far. But yes, I mean this comes up all the time with him. So when you sit there and you talk about it, I understand that the Democrats are trying to appease their progressive base. It is a mistake. You should never appease activists. Like the Republicans fucked up when they went for the what is it, the not the Episcopalians, but the evangelists. When they decided to target the evangelist right, that was a mistake. The evangelist right are activists. That's true. But they end up pissing off every single person that they come in contact with.
Are you
Same
telling
thing's true
me?
for the woke left.
Are you telling me that Ronald Reagan in getting the honestly, I could say there's it's beyond value. The endorsement of Jim Baker himself. Are you saying
I
that
I have no idea who that is.
I
Who is
I
Jim
don't know
Baker?
what to say. Wow. Okay, so Jim Baker invented the 700 Club, and
Ah,
he's just like he's one of the big Tammy Faye Baker. Does that name sound familiar?
nope.
Wow. Neat. Okay, so TV preacher. Like one of the big
You
TV
say
preachers.
that, but I have a narrow skill set, right?
Oh, no, that's
My
fair.
skill
That's
set
fair.
is mathematics and engineering. That
Yeah,
takes a
there's
lifetime of education to attain. And realistically, I see no value in pop culture.
well, there kind of isn't. So, I mean, that's reasonable. I mean, this is a bit beyond pop culture, but you're not a Christian. So, why would you be following, Christian television, right?
That too, yeah.
So, there you go. It's just he's a big name TV preacher, to put it
Good
simply.
to know.
And he's got a long story. He spent a lot of time in jail and got out on the other side after basically being pretty much a shitty guy and bilking a bunch of his what would you call them, pensioner, not pensioners, parishioners, we'll say, for lack of a better word, bilking them for
Mm.
millions of dollars. and not being really responsible with his money, being fully honest. He's come out the other side, and he is, well, he's come out the other side a used car salesman. So you are getting a used car, and you're not getting a good deal on it, but you're not getting ripped off, and you're not getting stolen from anymore. So, bless his heart, he's an honest grifter now, at least. So, a few years in the clink, it it wisened him up. But either way, he's just kind of a weird cultural touchstone, if you will. But that was kind of an off the edge tangent. To make it make more sense, in the 80s, he was probably one of the most powerful Christians in America. Like, his word could get some things done because of how much of the evangelical power there was, and how it was in the seat of power, where now we have these, scienticians, these Church of Science believers that are, now,
Scientismists.
yes, these scientismists that are now in our seats of power, that are, doing so much to ruin so much.
Well, the problem is probably the better term is technocrats, right?
I would use that
There's a
term,
lot of
but
people.
there's there's an implication of that with people that have some kind of sanity and are maybe just transhumanists, as
Right.
opposed to just being crazy, fucking useful idiots that are pandering to less than 5% of the entire human population.
The problem is that you have these people who are lawyers attempting to explain engineering concepts to a bunch of people who are neither lawyers nor engineers. And it's hilarious, but very, very disheartening.
I suppose that's one way of looking at it. I would say it's more of a shoving it down their throats, whether they like it or not, as opposed to trying to explain it to them. If we're being entirely accurate. you know,
That's fair.
if we are talking fully 2021. And sadly, we are. Because we are stuck in this horrible year for, well, another month and a few days, right? Who knows
Hmm.
what the next one brings. But all said, I mean, it's been a pretty all right week. I mean, we've got our boy Kyle has been seen freed, and all the cases related to that look pretty good because of it. It sets a really excellent cultural and American societal precedent, if you will.
Yes, it does.
And
I'm looking forward to the next summer of riots, wherein those individuals who burn down people and businesses are put in the proper place, if you will. Natural selection should take a solid course in the future.
well, let's hope. Let's hope. So,
And I want to be very
yeah.
clear. I'm not an unfeeling individual. I know this is going to sound terrible. This is kind of a tangent. But I'm not an unfeeling individual. But when it comes to pro-social versus antisocial behavior, I am a very firmly, in support of pro-social behavior. One of the things I was telling Evan, and honestly, buddy, old pal, I probably should be heading to bed pretty soon.
Fair.
I spent the day searching a swamp for the remains of an individual who's probably been dead for 7 years, right? I do search and rescue. I volunteer. I do all of that stuff on a regular basis. But when it comes to like pro-social versus anti-social behaviors, one of the biggest detriments that I believe is that we have decided to enforce societally these antisocial behaviors. And one of those things is things like going out and burning down fucking cities. So when we start talking about this stuff, as far as I'm concerned, this is a great ruling for Kyle Rittenhouse to go free.
Well, it's the only acceptable ruling, really. I mean, if the law
I
means
am
anything, if the
I am
letter of it.
amazed. I am amazed that it happened, given what happened with what was it? The what was that guy with the George Floyd?
Oh, Chauvin?
What was his name?
Derek Chauvin,
Yeah.
yeah.
Given the Derek Chauvin trial, I was very surprised that the Rittenhouse trial went the way it did. Cause like, and I'm not saying that Derek Chauvin didn't have stuff that was wrong against him.
Oh,
I
yeah, no, he
went
was a
down.
piece of shit.
So I got a cop.
Like, let's be
I got
honest.
a
He
cop.
seemed like a
I
shitty
got a
cop.
cop like he does. He does, and I've got like three or four houses down from me is a retired police chief who I just turned around and I went up to one day during the middle of these trials and said, "Hey, could you explain what you think about this? Because it's really shitty for us as individuals, smart as we may be, Craig and I both, Evan, all of us, right? Smart as we may be, we are not in that line of work. And I have had an EMT qual. I have looked at that line of work before. It is brutal to deal with what those people are dealing with. And so I asked him, and he said that he thinks that it was excessive use of force. So I'm not saying that is the jury's determination of Derek Chauvin being guilty is wrong. An individual who is a law enforcement individual took a look at that case. I asked him for his opinion, and I think that he's probably got a better understanding of what the appropriate use of force is for an individual here. But in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, I think that this is a fantastic verdict. I was very surprised that it came back the way it did, solely because I was much more concerned the jury would cave to protester demands than they would actually base things on the merits of the case. For me, when it comes to something like Derek Chauvin, I was firmly of the opinion that Chauvin would walk solely because George Floyd was a piece of shit.
Fair.
There's a lot of people who get butthurt about that.
And
But
actually,
George Floyd was
let
a
me
piece of
break
shit.
into that specific point. Up until fairly recently, I have kind of begrudgingly defended Derek Chauvin. I have learned in this past month, honestly, that he had Narcan in his cruiser.
Did he really?
Yes. So the one thing that we have been sideline quarterbacking this shit on, the overdose, which I'm sure we're all in agreement. If Craig were here, he would be too. That's the realest problem in this whole thing.
Yep.
And what that means is that there was a solution available, and he did not do everything in his power as an officer of the law to protect a member of the public.
True. That's true. Now, granted again, and I'm going to play devil's advocate because, like I said,
well, fair enough. I'm having to anyway myself,
It was excessive force. But devil's advocate is that you do not if you did not believe that he could be reasonably constrained in that situation, then getting the Narcan would be out of the question because you need to make sure the public is safe from the individual who is high as a kite. That being said, if he suspected an overdose, then he should have grabbed the Narcan. Although and I want to toss in another wrench here. I don't know. So the word is that George Floyd was doing a speedball. So I don't know whether Narcan would have helped or hurt the man at that point. I mean,
I can answer that question. And
excellent.
Yes, actually. Now, it would not have worked as well as it ought, because that's a lot of shit to deal with. But it would fix the opiate issue. So
Got it.
It would.
I'm figuring
it would take a very unstable situation.
Respiratory impacts.
Yeah, he's going to be able to breathe again. His lungs are still going to be in bad shape, but he's gonna
Right.
be able to
Well,
breathe.
I mean, so I figure his So the problem is with speedballs, right? Is you simultaneously stress the respiratory system and the heart system. So you feel great because you're basically getting flooded with neurotransmitters as your brain's trying to sit there and compensate for the fact that you just trashed your two primary life support systems. You feel great because your brain's pumping out as many neurotransmitters as possible. The downside is you have a very high probability of death. Sitting there and administering Narcan gives you respiratory function back, but if your heart is pumping like insane levels of stuff, sitting there and decreasing the suppressant effect of the opioid, I don't know. I don't know if I would judge that. So while I
Well,
agree with you, it probably wouldn't have had an effect.
the
It
thing is, the
wasn't
man had
ideal.
bad lungs. He didn't have a bad heart.
Yep.
So,
Oh, really? He didn't have a bad
I
heart.
mean, he had as bad a heart as any man that lives in the ghetto and doesn't eat well does. But I mean, he didn't have a specifically bad heart.
Okay, I did not
He
realize
did
that.
have
I was
his
under the
lungs were
impression that it was not in good shape.
no, it's his lungs that specifically weren't. Like his lungs had suffered damage from having COVID previously. Huh. Funny enough. But not only that,
Ooh.
like he was like a smoker and had been doing, fucked up shit like smoking crack and doing actual like smoking speedballs and shit like that. So I mean, his lungs were actually fucked up. So
Mm.
that would have like specifically the Narcan in that instance, it was it would have been the solution. Now this is of course
Mm.
this is Monday morning quarterbacking at best. I mean, we weren't there. We don't know what he was going through. But tell you what, you could have sent that little Asian dude that was holding on that had his knee on dude's ankle. Like, yo, bro, go over and get me the Narcan out of here. He's been saying he was saying he couldn't breathe when he was in the thing, and he was kind of gasping for breath. Then get me that. I think something's up with this guy. Get me that. We'll get it to him, and then we're just gonna hold him here until whatever arrives. And if they can, and they hold him. That's the other thing. If he's not like half passing out from that, he's going to be speeding. He's going to be able to get into that rest position because
Mm.
he's going to lose that downer. So he's going to be up and ready to move. There's plenty of guys there to hold him down. They've already got him handcuffed, so it's just a matter of like,
Yep.
all right, we're going to get you in the rest position. You're going to sit here until you calm the fuck down because you're big as fuck. You're kind of scary, and you just definitely came out of something. And there
Yep.
might be a living George Floyd today. And
It could be.
that's what gives me the biggest pause now. Cuz the Narcan, I've probably saved 2 lives in my day. So
It
I
could have. It could have.
so I could have
I
saved
mean,
another one,
I
but
again,
that's
I
something
struggle
else.
with it, but like I said, I talked to a cop and he said that he thought it was excessive use of force. So
That's a fair argument.
the guy who dragged me into the middle of the woods today was a cop, and he has. You listen and you talk to the folks who are cops. I know I hate cops. I'm a libertarian. I hate cops. I can't even begin to explain how much loathing I have for the idea of police. However, I simultaneously also have 36 years of life experience. Well, let's call it 21 years of 31 years of life experience, and 5 years where you're basically just an extended fetus. Um, in that 31 years, you learn over time that cops fulfill an unfortunate but necessary role because we have antisocial individuals. But when you start talking to cops, they have a very, very unique view on the world. And it is worth sitting there and getting their opinion on police related issues because they will tell you their opinion of specific rules. And they will also tell you that it doesn't matter what they think, they have to enforce those rules. And as an individual who's a compliance engineer, I know what that looks like in the real world, right? You turn around and you get a phone call and it's, oh, did you technically fulfill this compliance document thing? You're like, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah,
And
did you make
it's
sure and fill out that TPS report?
it really is, and 9 times out of 10 it's like that. And so the individuals Like there is stupid politics at every level of everything, but that is neither here nor there.
Well, I mean, that's the nature of the
So,
beast. When you get too many middlemen involved, they breed like rabbits.
yep.
And
I mean, so, but again, it is very useful to always tap into the experts in any individual field. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say. And it doesn't mean that you can't ask them challenging questions. But when it comes to things like law enforcement, where I do not have enough direct experience, I do not work with those people on a regular basis, I do not interact with those people on a regular basis, I would much rather consult a law enforcement individual with 30 plus years experience, retired police chief captain, than sit there and judge from the sidelines as a quarterback. And that's what I did, and he said he thought it was excessive use of force, so I will stand by what that cop said.
true. But then again, you ask another officer, you might get another answer. But it's
Well,
a fair
and
argument. It's a
that's
fair argument, and I'm
true.
not going to disagree
That's
because
true.
you can make that argument, and it's not at all dishonest to make.
No,
Speaking,
it's not.
however, of dishonest arguments, have you heard about what happened to Paul Gosar for his incredibly cringy advertisement?
I don't know who Paul Gosar is, nor
Representative
this
from
advertisement of which you
Arizona,
speak.
if I'm not mistaken. Uh,
Go ahead and fill me in, Evan, because names and places have no meaning to me. I don't have enough time
Fair
to
point.
keep
You're a
up
busy
on all
guy.
this
You're a
social
busy guy.
media
Okay,
shit.
so
I am a reasonably busy guy.
yeah, and this is going to be a little inside baseball too. So yeah, I forget that. I am kind of a complete news hound. So
That's okay.
yeah,
Hey,
somebody's got to
we
keep on
all
top of
need
this.
to sit there and have somebody's got to read this shit.
Yeah. Yeah, well, at least I've got the mental health to deal with it now, so it's fine. Better me
Mm.
than some poor bastard who can't deal with this shit. Anyway, he tweeted out a Attack on Titan edit that featured the faces of numerous politicians on both sides. Uh,
Oh, yeah. I remember this.
yeah, and it,
And
it was
so
kind
he
of lame.
slayed AOC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
This,
has,
this so I saw this come across. Let me provide you my initial reaction.
yeah.
I saw this come across my Twitter feed, and I thought this was the dumbest fucking bullshit ever, and then it somehow turned into a news story like a day or two later. Like, I never saw the original video. I saw the reactions to it. I saw AOC sitting there and throwing up her hands and going, "Oh my God, poor me." Over the whole entire thing, I saw the left reacting to it. I saw the right reacting to it. And by the time I drilled down to what the fuck it was that was occupying so much of my unnecessary time, um, it turned out to be probably one of the dumbest things I've ever seen.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that he shouldn't have showed it, right? Like if you think that was what it is, but it's an anime cartoon
Yes.
with heads superimposed, and people are
Yep.
debating whether or not this should be allowed in politics. Again, my stance is bring back dueling. So this was retarded, and I had
Yes.
to suffer through it for a week.
Yes. Yes, it was. So it has since resulted in his censure and removal from all committees
Oh.
for what essentially amounts to a political cartoon, if we're being honest and, just reducing this to what it really is.
Hmm.
How many political cartoons have featured, somebody shooting a gun at somebody else or slicing at somebody with a sickle and maybe hitting their head with a hammer as if that were, some iconography that one might use for, say, Sandy Cortez or something, right?
I don't know.
Or God forbid, you're a well-known comedian and you hold up a bloody likeness of a politician's head, for instance.
Well, I mean, the issue that you have here, and again, I'm going to go with, I really want to emphasize how dumb, both from the person putting it out and the people reacting to it, how dumb I think this is.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
I have a lot of shit that I have to deal with on a daily basis that's important. This show is the 3 hours a week that I basically get to sit there and fuck off. And it's a great experience because I have Evan coming at here with pop culture that I don't get normally exposed to. Craig coming at here with really boring science stuff that I choose to generally not read because it's terribly boring science stuff. And it works out pretty well for me. This is on the top list of retarded things that I have had to deal with in all of 2020. Right? It has actually made the top 5 list of stupid shit that I should not have spent time with. So it is very important to stress how dumb this whole entire thing is. But
Oh, yeah.
at the same time, like, we have way worse examples of the same shit happening on the left and the right. So why the fuck is this happening? Like, I read a terrifying article about a brand new, so in terms of like where this is versus things that I think actually matter, right? This is on the scale of roughly a 1 in terms of things that actually matter in the real world. In terms of probably closer to like a 7 to a 10, they just discovered a new mass grave from what is likely to be the Nazi era of individuals who existed solely to drain their blood for officers and soldiers fighting the war.
Oh, wow.
That shit is fucked up. This
Yeah.
goddamn article where an individual sat there and copy pasted, or somebody photoshopped a senator's head onto a goddamn anime cartoon. Like, seriously, people. This is terrible. But we have way worse shit that we should be dealing with. And way worse shit that we should be addressing. And all of these stupid examples is nothing more than a distraction from the horrors and the reality that we should actually be sitting there and drilling down into. Because it is much more important that we prevent things like the Holocaust and some of the outright evil acts than we have than sitting there and throwing up our hands and saying, oh my God, this senator sat there and tweeted out a video where he slayed his opponent in a cartoon fashion in really shitty Photoshop.
Yeah. Well, I've got a bit of good news. The FDA is complying with the Freedom of Information Act related to Pfizer's vaccine and why they were able to deem it safe for usage. They said they'll be releasing roughly 500 pages a month for the next 659 months.
Oh my God, yes.
So in 55 years, we'll have all that info, and we'll know just what made the Pfizer vaccine so safe.
They were all okay with reviewing all of that information and approving a gene therapy for general populace use.
Yeah, because
within like
of
110
this is
days.
not them stonewalling or slow walking things at all. No, this is a complete compliance.
They are. We're talking about 50 some odd years to do something they did in under 6 months. Like, if you are telling me that this is good enough for you to make a decision on, then I deserve to see it. And this is why. This is why the left is losing the discussion on these things as vaccines, because I, as an individual, I mean, it's a gene therapy. I really want to see the fucking safety data that they submitted to the FDA, because, like it or not, I haven't been able to find it on my own.
Isn't that curious? Isn't that just peculiar?
It was stunning. It was stunning in January when these things had just been released 2 months ago. It was really just eye-opening in September when they mandated I should take it.
Not just you, sir. Not just you. There's a whole lot of people that have had their eyes open to kind of the way of the world. For
True, but I don't care about those people.
oh, fair, fair. But the more of them there are, the better.
Ah, sorry, people. It's okay.
Oh, but I have some good news, or is it good bad news? I think it's good bad news. Yeah, we'll go with that. So the CBO came back with the numbers on the Build Back Better plan, and they say
Yep.
after everything, it adds 367 billion to the deficit over a decade. So this,
Really?
oh no, it adds money. Yeah, no, accounting for all that, no, it adds a deficit of 367 billion dollars.
Which you should multiply by a factor of 10 based on previous spending bills.
Absolutely, always add a zero to government spending
Yep.
if you want to really know what the numbers are.
Yep.
So essentially,
I mean,
it will not
like
pay for itself.
At the end of the day, what's stunning to me, and all I can say is this is sitting here as a libertarian. One of the things that pisses me the fuck off is that you see all of these politicians come in and say, "Oh yeah, I just won barely 50% of the vote, therefore I have a mandate." No, you don't have a mandate.
The
You
perfect
barely
example
won
of that was
50% of the
Bernie
vote.
Sanders saying, "I can't stand these two people holding up the will
Yep.
of the other 48."
Right.
What about
Yep.
those other
And it was
50
really
that are
52
with
versus
those 50?
48.
Yeah, you mean to say you can't stand the will of 52 people holding back the will of 48?
Yep. Yep. And that is a constant problem. But when we start talking about like Joe Biden and his mandate, let's be honest, the majority of people did not vote for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump. And this is one of the reasons why I very firmly believe we should have a no vote or a nullifying vote, wherein you don't necessarily support the candidate, so that when they get their final numbers, it is you don't have to necessarily support somebody, but you could vote against somebody and you just cancel somebody else's vote out instead of this, oh, I have a mandate. No, you didn't have a mandate. Donald Trump pissed a whole bunch of people off, which is perfectly understandable considering he's got a mouth on the man.
Yeah, about 59
But
million.
at the same time, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you have a goddamn mandate where you can force everyone to do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, you could
No,
say there's 80 million
Joe
people
Biden
who didn't agree with that
and Joe
mandate.
Biden, if he coming in with this, oh, I have a mandate bullshit, is how we get these stupid fucking expenditure bills passed. Meanwhile, we have crazy high inflation from the social spending that we already did.
Yeah. And then we're going to toss on another 1.5 trillion, of which about
That's
10%
exactly right.
goes to actual infrastructure, not to mention this Build Back Better social bullshit, which
Yep.
as just stated, will add 367 billion to the overall debt. And generally fuck things too, because I hope you folks are really excited for your Model 2026 with its integrated breathalyzer. That's going to be a fun car to drive, won't it?
Is that an actual thing?
Yes, sir. That was in the
I know
primary
I'd heard
infrastructure
some of
bill.
that stuff.
Oh, there's so much dumb bullshit in there. Uh, we've got to get people in to, number one, put in election security measures so that ahem doesn't happen again. And so that, things don't have to escalate any farther than they already have. And then, of course, on top of that, to make sure that, these problems are put to a halt, as it were. Make sure that the committees
Mm.
responsible for this money keep it sitting or send it back. Or, if they must, spend it on things that actually fucking do something. As opposed to, teaching Pakistani girls, basket weaving
Well,
underwater.
and again, you run into stuff like, why is it that we're spending money on solar and wind when we could just sit there and set a flat? If we turned around and we said, okay, we're not going to impose a carbon tax because that's going to hurt people too much. We are instead going to propose a carbon credit. For every unit of carbon-free electricity generated after the point of initial build, you get 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Right? Do you know how many fucking nuke plants would be built overnight?
Well, you
Like
get
they
more
would just
flies with
go up.
honey, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Like that
you don't. You get more
they would
flies with shit, but we
produce
don't
their
want flies.
honey
We want
instantaneously.
productive things like fucking honeybees here. But
Right.
yeah.
Like it would be instantaneous.
Oh
And we
yeah, no,
don't do
overnight.
that kind of shit. Instead we do these politically preferred options, which is like there is value. And again, I'm speaking as a libertarian here. I am not an anarchist. I don't believe necessarily that everything should be 100% free market. I do believe in regulation. I think that the government can have some social engineering policy, but it needs to come in and it needs to be balanced and it needs to be fair. If we did that, we would have zero emissions technology all completely deployed for electricity generation within 5 to 10 years, and with it for the rest of our heating and most of our cars within 20. And it's not going to be batteries, it's probably going to be fuel cells, and that's just the way it is, but that's how it's going to end up.
Not unreasonable. I mean, I could. Well, we were starting down that path. We really were. I mean, you could see the market forces pulling it that way, and the market was being allowed to function as it does. And
Yep.
then some things happened to artificially affect everything in the whole fucking world.
Yep.
And here we are today in that after time. So I've got some good news for you that you may not have heard. You may have. Uh, Cuomo has been found, well, basically, he's finally catching some shit on the nursing home deaths. The investigation has turned its eyes towards that, and they're saying that he significantly misrepresented those numbers. Finally. Not that he might necessarily face any sort of charge for it, but at least it's being talked about by, you know, his own people. So we can
When
start laying
when
something at
when
that.
somebody actually does something about it, I will believe that it matters.
Fair enough.
And the reality is that nobody has done anything about it for fucking, for nearly 6 to 10 months. So screw it.
And the only thing they've got
Like
him on is
Cuomo's out.
unwanted touching. Come the
Yeah,
fuck
and
on.
Cuomo's out. They put in somebody who was even more liberal than Cuomo, which, it, what is it? Not
Comrade Commissar Hochul?
his name. No, no, yeah, Commissar Holt. Well, no, there's some individual who sat there and predicted that. And that's true. That's what they did. They substituted Cuomo with somebody who was somehow, and I thought it was impossible, more progressive, right? Like I thought it couldn't be done, but it could. And that individual has done absolutely nothing. Now I'm actually, as much as Hochul talks a good game, but she hasn't actually passed any laws that inconvenience me. So I'm not too worried about it. But when it comes to like Cuomo, it's good that he's gone. It's good that he's been ousted. It's good that he got ousted for the Me Too shit. It would have been way better if they actually sat there and dealt with, hey, you passed a policy that we informed you was literally going to kill, thousands of people, and we should do something. But I
Yeah.
mean, what can you do, right? Like that's the difficulty that you had, because he can come in, and when you start talking about that policy, yes, we can come in here and we can say, hey, this guy killed X number of thousand people. But the reality is, you can turn around and say that if he didn't pass that law, if he didn't sit there and mandate that they accept them back, then these people would have no place to go. And that would be just as terrible. And that's what he's going to argue, and nothing's going to happen because of it.
Oh, fair enough. So you'd mentioned about a half hour ago about wanting to get out of here, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And I've got, since we started with a good and happy story, and we've had a pretty good week, and the world's being kind of good to us, I got two good ones to close us out. So, we've got a Navy shipbuilder that they were trying to put in the vaccine mandate, which, by the way, there is no vaccine mandate now at all. No such thing exists. It has been stayed. The stay has been upheld.
I will.
And
I
OSHA
will
will not be
correct
enforcing
you
it.
on that. I
But
believe federal contractors has not been challenged yet.
no. But that being said, I'll have a link
General
to the
public.
story here. A federal subcontractor of the U.S. Navy, they have reversed their course on the vaccine mandate this last week because too many people said, okay, fine, we quit then. So they,
We did too.
beautiful. That's what you got to do, man.
That being said, I'm in a better position for having gotten my religious exemption than for those who basically said, "Yeah, we're gonna quit." But at the same time, it's no longer. They've literally announced in the last week, we will no longer be firing you on January 4th because you didn't fulfill your vaccine mandate, which is the new revised date, by the way, because it used to be December 8th.
Uh-huh.
We will no longer fire you on January 4th for not being in compliance. You will instead be written up. And that's going to go in your permanent file. And that's what
Oh,
we've been told.
your permanent
We,
record. You know, I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised
yeah.
either, being fully honest, if we don't see that date just kind of keep creeping out just a little bit more and a little bit more as
It,
these
it, it
decisions
could
keep
be.
rolling in.
It could be. It could also be a legitimately they're going to switch to, we're going to write a permanent thing in your file saying that you weren't willing to comply. But that's okay. You can continue to work here in the meantime. Right? Which is what they've essentially announced.
Small victories. Small victories.
Yep.
Certainly worth taking. So, I've got one from the Lancet. Of all places. And it's great. Title: COVID-19. Stigmatizing the unvaccinated is not justified. And, I mean, what more could you hear than that? I mean, who could imagine medical apartheid is a bad thing? Perish the thought.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, we're finally seeing real organizations come out and speak against this garbage. Like, this shit is hurting people. And not to say that it wasn't perhaps specifically intended to do so. We really can't say without more evidence. Maybe feels a little bit like it, but, you know, again, can't say without more evidence. But this is the truth. This is the plain and simple truth of it. Medical apartheid, apartheid of any type, a real apartheid, I should say, of any type. If a people choose to be apart, then they choose to fucking be apart. Whatever. But, you know, if things are being artificially affected by outside groups, then yeah, absolutely, you can't have that shit. So, fucking stop it.
So I'm gonna caution you on this.
Go ahead.
It wouldn't surprise me if this is a fake article.
Could be.
And that is
It's getting a
because
lot of play.
it is written by Gunter Kampf,
All right.
right?
Go on.
So that is written. I don't know what Gunter translates to in German, but that translates to whatever Gunter struggle. So Mein Kampf is my struggle. This is literally Gunter's struggle. So maybe there's a real guy named Gunter Kampf,
Fair.
but I'm gonna say it's probably fake.
Let's see. What is Gunter? No, Gunter's a name.
Yeah, Gunter is a name, but Kampf is my struggle, or
Well,
Kampf
Kampf
is
is
struggle.
struggle or fight. Yeah, I actually know a little bit of German.
So reading the name, I'm like,
I mean, it
yeah,
is a surname. Eh.
true.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. It is a.
Could
Oh,
you
you're
imagine
gonna
if this was a
fucking love
bullshit
this.
article?
You're gonna fucking love this. It's a German and Ashkenazic last name,
Oh, that's funny.
isn't it?
That is slightly hilarious.
It really fucking is. But yeah, it's a real last name. So I mean, it's entirely possible this is legitimate. It's also possible somebody's just pulling some shit out of their ass, which is where
Yep.
where you would pull some shit from. I mean, if we're being honest.
Well, and I want to be clear. Like, so reading through this article, what they do is they basically state something along the lines of, when we sit there and we population adjust everything, there's no real significant difference between the two, right? And that's fair. That's absolutely fair. That's actually pretty much in line with what I've seen. Um,
Well,
that being said, it's I would just be cautious of it, because
fair
it's
enough.
it's
That's
literally
entirely
it's
reasonable.
it's half a page, and is written by somebody named Gunter Struggle. So I'm
Well,
just
Gunter Kampf,
just
it is a real last name.
okay. I understand.
We will have to wait and see if it sees any review or update. But, it's there and it's getting a lot of airplay. So that means that, the people that need to hear this kind of message are going to hear it. Where this specific kind of message has been the kind of thing we've been saying for a long time, and our voice has been, muffled at best.
It could be, yeah, yeah,
So,
and
so
that's
if nothing else, it's good information that's getting out there, even if it is some silly German LARPer. I mean, better that it get out there, even if it get out through a less than legitimate source.
well. I'm not saying it's less than legitimate. It looks like a legitimate publication,
Well, no, I'm just
but
playing the
when it
devil's
comes
advocate
to
here with your,
when it comes
proposition.
to, like, this is published in the Lancet, right? That's what this is. But this is also correspondence. It's not the actual journal and all of that other stuff. The Lancet is a prestigious medical journal. It got published. It is a reasonable position that is likely reflective of the article, or the journal editor's position on this issue, based on the data they're receiving. This does in fact correspond with many of the observations that have been made in most recent data sets. That being said, I see this and I read this article and I say, who the frig decided to write an article that's contrarian? And it actually got published, and the name is, Gunter's Struggle.
You're really not going to back off of that one, are you?
I am not. No, I am not. I well, so this is actually very, very normal for if somebody wants to spoof a journal, right?
Sure.
So this is what you do. You put something that's supposed to be immediately noticeable in the title or the names of the submission, right? And that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, yeah, but then you're not supposed to put out like, oh, fair enough. I mean, I guess I guess that's the way to do it. You put out something that's like, oh, this is obviously going to be a spoof, But then you just put out a real article under a spoof name so that, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
everybody's
it's
going to
not
think
an
this is a silly
article-
goof.
It is not an article in the classic sense of peer review type articles.
Oh, no, not at all. It's actually very
Journals
quick.
do also have things like opinions and
Yeah,
editorials.
it
that
really
go
does
in,
come
but they
across
tend to be
more in
fact-based.
editorial than
It really
like
does.
anything else.
It really does. An editorial.
But that
written
said-
by Gunther Struggle.
But that said, it's the kind of thing that needs to be said. It really and truly is.
It
and
is.
it's the kind of shit we've been
It
talking
is.
about.
I'm just saying. Be
You could
cautious.
say that we have been
Cautious.
struggling to get this information out.
I agree.
It's
agree.
been a
But
struggle.
at the same time, I also sit there and see people saying Gunther's struggle and COVID-19 stigmatizing the unvaccinated is not justified. I read it. It's a whopping 3 paragraphs, and I go, yeah, this is bullshit.
Well, what are you going to do? But anyway, the information is getting out there. It's getting airplay, which it needs to get. So even if it gets taken down later, it's already gotten out, and retractions don't see as much airplay as the initial article, no matter what, whether it's good or bad. So let's be thankful that at least in this case, it's a good article. That's or a good editorial, being honest. That's, getting out the kind of information that does need to get out there. So, good for the bad, or good with the bad, I'd say on balance, it's a good thing. But anyway, we've made it a plenty long enough night, and I have a song to finish it out with, but I'll do that after we do the outro here. So, again, you can find me at That Fake Guy Dan. I'm Evan. He's Steve, and you can be found where best?
At Ratman720, wherever products are sold.
Oh, yes. At your favorite retail locations. So, if you have any ideas for the show, any questions, any topics you need further broken down, or topics you think we should be covering, hit any one of us up. Me, definitely, because I'm a news hound and I'm on this shit all the time, so I'll get the message. Or if you want to get on our Discord and help with the communications on things, or maybe in the near future be a part of live broadcasts, because that is going to be a thing. Probably not this year, but I may try it. Who knows? We'll see. And we'll just kind of see how everything runs. So with that being said, thanks for tuning in, and enjoy this new song from my buddy Robert Bretz. Called Television.
try to hang on. The more I see, it's hard for me to know what's right from wrong. And all I know is what I know, but that doesn't mean that it's true. My head tries to separate the fiction from the fact. I try to find a path to lead me back where I was at. And all I know is what I've seen, but what I've seen frightens me.
All right, so that's that. Today's show has been brought to you by the letters A and R and the numbers 1 and 5. Thanks for tuning in, kids. See you again soon.